Are you ready? I'd like to call to order the school committee budget workshop on February 9th, 2022. If everyone could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America,
and the
and to the
republic
republic
for which it stands, one nation,
nation,
under God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
liberty
and justice for all. Thank you. Statement by the chair is the purpose of the procedure of this workshop. This is going to be one of two workshops. This will be the longer of the two, I expect, and it is so John McNamee, our business manager, can review the budget, and this is the time that we can ask questions about different items and so forth. Mr. McNamee, do you want to start?
I think if I may, I will start. John, you and I agreed to that today?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So I usually use this, Madam Chair, as sort of a rehearsal for, when anyone from the town budget committee or town council is coming in. Thank you, everyone, for coming to our first budget workshop. Last summer, while writing the back to school plan for the Department of Education, it became clear that everyone's patience would be tested once again, that planning for normal school year was not in the cards once again, that we would all have to commit to collective action for the common good once again, for the sake of our students and staff. However, what was also clear was the fact that we could seize the opportunity once again to envision and create a new normal, taking all that we'd learned since 2020 and rebuild the way we do school in a manner that continues to honor the unique strengths and interests and talents and affinities of all students. This year, like last, where most schools struggled, Wilbur McMahon School has succeeded from the get-go, always offering full in-person learning for all pre-K through grade 8 Little Compton students with very few disruptions. And it's due to the town's strong support of the school, which affords administration and staff ready access to ample resources that serve the school quite well. Optimal class sizes, perfect for distancing, ample green spaces that are cooperatively maintained with the town DPW, HVAC and filtering purification systems that have been upgraded, appropriate custodial staffing for all of the cleaning, disinfecting, and sanitizing with overlapping shifts, and a robust investment in state-of-the-art instructional technology. It's never enough for our esteemed IT director, but we have put way over 6 figures into our instructional technology. Thank you, school committee and the town of Little Compton. In addition, the school has perfected leveraging several data points to capture and illuminate just how our kids are performing individually and as grade level cohorts, both academically and social emotionally. And this gives us tools that we need to empower students to understand their own journey, their own learning journeys towards proficiency and beyond. That end game is a robust post-high school plan for all of our kids. Regarding RICAS, which comes up quite a bit, the state's comprehensive assessment system. It is true, state tests are only one data point. They capture one moment in time, but these objective measures are necessary in schools because they tell us where we are. They're a yardstick pointing to our position relative to other districts in the state. And RICAS 2021 data definitely did reveal that the innovative systems that we've put into place, the hard copy resources that have now shifted to digital portals, online resources, that we were on course. We ended up with a wonderful standing in terms of our state's districts. There are 66 LEAs, 56 of them have grades 3 through 8, which are the assessed grades. And Little Compton is number 5 in ELA achievement in the state, number 1 in growth achievement in ELA, 2021 RICAS, number 6 in math achievement, number 3 in growth. That is proof positive. The proof is in the pudding, the proof is in the objective measure in that data point that we are on course, and truly the support from this committee and from the town has come to bear, definitely, in these wonderful, wonderful pieces of information that we have regarding our kids' academic and social emotional health. Surely these past 2 years have brought challenges to all sectors of society, but true to form, the Little Compton School Department and the greater community have worked together to offer our students enriching and vibrant education and safe and healthy spaces. The fiscal year 2023 budget has no surprises. As usual, over 90% of the presentation represents fixed costs, which includes the tuition hike for Portsmouth High School. We are looking for a little bit of a shift in how we apportion our resources, and we are asking your support in braiding $45,000 from this fiscal year draft budget to existing reserves for capital improvements in order to actuate the long-range capital improvement plan that is being submitted to the School Building Authority next week. And you are all privy to that. So without further ado, regarding our big plans for our little school at not a high cost, take it away, Mr. McNamee. And thank you, Mr. McNamee, for all you do for the school department and for the town of Little Compton, even working weekends with your superintendent. This budget. Thank you so much for all you do.
Maybe I want to wait until after we review the budget for those thanks. But anyway, Mariah, do we have the PowerPoint?
I was just going to ask if, oh, you have it, Mariah? Okay.
Okay, so before we get into the PowerPoint, I just wanted to go over briefly the budget process. I know we've got a couple of new members on the committee, so I just want to kind of explain the process from now until the financial town meeting on the budget. So we'll have 2 workshops. As Mrs. Allen had indicated, workshop number 1 probably is going to be the lengthier of the 2. And these are basically for the school committee to kind of dive into the budget, ask any questions, and really get to a point where they can approve the budget, which is going to be scheduled at a meeting on 2/28/22. I believe that's a Monday, February 28th. The reason that we have to have that special meeting is that by town charter, we need to submit the budget to the town clerk on March 1st. So what happens on March 1st is we'll submit our budget to the town clerk, a copy to the Budget Commission. I'll probably send it to George Crowell, and also to Tony Texera, the town administrator. The budget board, the Budget Commission then takes all the budgets that they have at that point in time, and they have a series of open meetings. We're scheduled for March 15th to review our budget with the Budget Commission. Generally, in the past, I think we've been trying to do that as a joint meeting, but I think basically what will happen at that meeting is that the superintendent and I will present the budget to the Budget Commission. Members of the school committee can attend, obviously, as members of the public. There's not going to be any votes, so I don't think we have to advertise that meeting. And all the Budget Commission meetings are public or open meetings, so they have to comply with the Open Meetings Act. So agendas are published and so on. So at that point, the the Budget Commission will question us on the budget, major components of the budget. I'll probably review with them the PowerPoint that we'll be going over this evening. And at that point, they take our budget under advisement. And in the past, we haven't really had any situations where the Budget Commission has come back to us and saying, yeah, you need to cut your budget by some amount. Now, by state law, the Budget Commission can reduce our budget. Excuse me, they can reduce the amount of funding for the budget, which the town provides us. So they could conceivably say, well, we're just going to give you $100,000 or $150,000 over last year's town allocation. And they can't specifically tell us how to spend the money, but they can reduce the funding if they so desire. Now, we haven't run into that because I think in the most part, we've been presenting realistic budgets. We clearly have a lot of support that we provide them for the budgets. So I'm not anticipating any issues this year. And for the new members, if you're not familiar with the maintenance of effort, any municipality has to fund the school department at the same level of funding as the prior year in the current year, unless there was a decrease in enrollment of greater than 5%, at which point they could then reduce their contribution lower than it was in the previous year. Again, that's never happened in the 10 years that I've been doing it, but and I don't anticipate that would be the case as well this year. So and then after we do our presentation, they take the budget under advisement. They also have a public meeting on the budget sometime in April. So the public is invited to attend, where they review the town budget, which includes the school committee, school department's budget. And that generally is in either second or third week in April, at which point the budgets get published and they get sent out for the financial town meeting, which I believe is either in the second or third week of May. Now, there's another opportunity at the financial town meeting to reduce the budget or increase the budget, either way. And in the past years, we've had some votes taken by the townspeople to, in some instances, reduce the budget. I don't recall whether there were any instances to increase the budget, but oftentimes you'll have some members of the community that'll just come in and say, we want to reduce the budget, school department budget by, let's say, $50,000. And there's really no support. I mean, they pull a number out of thin air and just want to kind of reduce the budget. So there was one year that there was some traction that developed, and it was, I believe it was a written vote, and it was pretty close, but we were able to vote that one down. And I believe last year there may have been a year before a voice vote, and it clearly wasn't close for a reduction in the school budget. So there's some potential there. I don't expect it, but as we go through the budget this year, one of the other areas for the new members is that there is a statute on the books that says that we cannot increase our request from the town by more than 4%. So we take last year's town appropriation, which was like 7.4 million or so, and we take 4% of that number, and that's the max that we can increase the budget by. And as you'll see, as we discuss tonight's budget, that's basically what we have in place now. We are requesting the max which I believe is somewhere around 295,000, which equals the 4% increase. Now, as we go through, you'll see the reasoning for that, and of course, some of it, obviously, we've got increased tuition costs for Portsmouth High School, and we're also looking to try to set aside some money for capital expenditures, because if you look at the 5-year capital plan, there's a lot of deferred maintenance in there, and the town doesn't really, and hasn't done so on their own side, is set aside some money for capital. And without those resources, without that capital being set aside, we really can't plan to do anything, because as you know, a lot of these projects take a couple of years to get to fruition. So I think it's important for us to continue to build up a capital reserve, and you can see that my recommendation to add a little bit of money from this year's budget, take a little bit of money from last year's accumulated surplus, and we do have some monies available at the Newport County Regional Special Education Program due to some good budgeting on that side that we could have available, and I would say that we put that money into capital as well, but obviously that's for the committee to make that decision ultimately. So that's kind of a snapshot of the process over the next 2 or 3 months. So if nobody has any questions, we'll jump right into the PowerPoint. So as we do every year, we take a look at the enrollment, and this year we're looking at a little bit of a decline in enrollments from 21 to 22, and you know, you can see it may be a little bit of a blip, but I think that what's helped us here is the Portsmouth High School enrollment going down to 87. So with the big increase in tuition, because that goes to 13.5 from about 10.4, we're mitigating some of the impact on the FY23 budget with that reduction. So what happens is we have a much larger 7th grade coming in. So in 24, we're going to wind up probably coming up to closer to 96 students at the high school because we have a graduating class that's a little bit smaller at the high school. So when we were initially looking at negotiating that contract, we looked at what the impact would be on the budget, and we thought we would have a much larger impact in 23, when in fact, with the enrollment, it's allowing us to kind of spread that out between 23 and 24. And again, 24 would be under a new contract. But anyway, that's really what we're looking at in terms of the enrollment. Next slide. So this is the enrollment by grade, and you can see we don't have a pre-K number in there, although we do intend to have a pre-K program in place. I think the pandemic hurt us in 21. The collaborative is fully supporting a program of pre-K. So, you know, if we can get back to 15 to 20 students, you know, you're going to see obviously a little bit of a jump in that overall enrollment when you're looking at that, the bottom line. But we are anticipating in the K numbers at 18. Again, if you look back at where we were in 20 pre-pandemic, we're using that number as a benchmark, but that's always a number that's very difficult to kind of pinpoint. You know, there have been some years where we've been to closer to 24. So I think it's a little bit more difficult to project enrollment numbers here. So we do think that pre-K through pre-K and K will have some little bit stronger numbers than what we're projecting at this point. And again, we talked about the enrollment. The current enrollment we have now is 87. And under the existing contract, we're guaranteeing 95 students in 22. So we are paying for some additional students to Portsmouth over and above the actual enrollment. That caveat goes away in the one-year extension in next year's contract. So state aid, this is actually better than it was looking a few weeks ago. The governor has provided an additional $50 million of funding to state aid to make districts whole, because all districts are suffering from a reduction in enrollment. So at this point in time, what they wanted to make every district whole. So the 50 million brings us up to the 432, which is where we were at last year. And you can see there's no increase. We were down at 292, so we were showing $140,000 of reduction in state aid, which would have been about 2% of the town appropriation from the beginning of from last year. So had that stayed, we would have been in the whole 2% before we even added any expenses to for FY23. So this was a real positive for all districts within the state. Now, I think they're going to have to, at some point in time, adjust that state aid formula, because if they then go back to using the enrollment and there's declining enrollment throughout the state, we're going to wind up seeing that impact at some point in the future. So I think they're going to have to take a hard look at the state aid formula going into FY24. So here's the town appropriation. So what we're saying that we basically fund our budget with revenues from state aid, town appropriation, we have out of district tuition, and we have Medicaid reimbursements that we get from special education services. And those are the four elements of revenue that support. The largest, obviously, is the town appropriation. And the fact that we have no increase in state aid, we're not looking at any major increases in the tuition or Medicaid. The funding is going to resort to the town appropriation. That's our only source. And you can see right now at the 4%, that would give us a request from the town of an additional $295,383, which is obviously much higher than we've seen in the last 4 years. And again, that's the 4% that is the maximum under the state statute in terms of what a school committee can propose in their budget.
John, can I just ask you a question before I go much further?
Sure, Mike.
On that state aid that you're proposing, that basically they're saying the same amount on that last slide. I don't know if Jonathan can go back to that, if you would. That 432,020, that's not guaranteed at this point, correct? Because that has to be passed on the budget, and the budget hasn't been passed at the state level, correct?
Correct. And there's often a caveat in there that if a district has some changes in enrollment, based on, we send in a hard enrollment number in March. And usually that would include free and reduced applications. But since we're on universal free lunch, they're not capturing free and reduced applications and students. So they can't really determine what the bonus might be for those because they don't have a mechanism for determining that. So clearly the legislation would have to approve the governor's budget for adding the additional 50 million. Based on the budget that I've seen, they're going to be hard pressed not to provide that, because there are some districts that are really going to be suffering if they don't get that number. And the state certainly right now is flush with money. So you are right, but I think practically speaking, I don't see that that would go back to the formula and reducing us by 140,000 at this point. But it obviously there is a possibility. But.
That's a big roll of the dice, right? That we're
Well, I take that bet.
Yeah, I mean, you were basically on a hypothetical situation that they are going to include the $50 million in the budget, so that this is the money that we're going to get.
Well, that's in the governor's proposed budget, and based on most of the business managers I've discussed, and also I've gone through the budget in Lincoln, and we've had that discussion with with my school committee, which has a superintendent from another district there, and they all feel pretty comfortable in adding that. In Lincoln, what we're suffering from is that we've got an increase in enrollment, and we're not going to see the impact on that because of what they're doing with the state aid. So in our case, we were losing about $200,000, which wasn't a lot based on, I think I got about 16 million in state aid in Lincoln. So the other thing with that, Mike, is that state aid formula is also takes into consideration real estate valuations in the communities. And there's been some substantial increase in that real estate. The increase in the real estate valuation increases what the state says that towns, cities and towns should be contributing to fund education. So I think in your case, Little Compton was around the $2 billion mark, and I think they're going to be going closer to $2.75 billion. So there's a lot of value that winds up going in there that factors into the state aid formula. So it's really something they're going to have to take a look at next year. But I feel pretty comfortable that the legislature would be pushing through the 50 million. I don't see where they'll deny the governor that, especially for education. It's an election year, so I feel pretty comfortable on that one.
Okay.
So on the expenditure side, we're looking at an increase in total expenditures of 3.75. We're going up to 8,178,976. And last year we were at 7,883,647. Last year was about a 2.64% increase. This year we're at 3.75. Again, a lot of that is the result of tuition increases, as well as you have your normal salary increases for all your contractual employees in that number, and we'll go over those items as well. But so it seems to be in line with where we're going from 19 to 20 with that type of an increase too. But I think we got to keep in mind that even at 3.75, that's being mitigated with the reduction in enrollment at the high school level, especially for the tuition. Because as we discussed when we were looking at that revised contract, if we put in the full amount and we had the same level of enrollment at the high school, we'd be in a world of hurt now, because we would certainly be in a situation where we need more than the 4% as an increase to cover those increased costs. Okay, so we talked about the revenues. We're looking at no increase, decrease in state aid, staying the same. We're looking at 8 out-of-district students at 6,000 per, so it's 48,000. And in order to get this to a balanced budget, which obviously by law the school committee needs to submit, we're looking at an increase in the town appropriation of 4%, or 295,383. So that's the key number in this whole budget process. Salaries and wages, we're looking at one increase in an FTE, and I don't know, Laurie, if you want to talk to that. I believe that is for additional services that are going to be required by students.
Yes, that's for classroom support. I have collaborated with Newport County Regional Special Ed. It is a town side, school side expense. It not a regional expense. It would not be a regional employee. It would be a Little Compton employee. Teaching assistant. And our teaching assistants, we get a lot of services and commitment from them. So there's an uptick in student need, and this position is vital in meeting those needs.
So that's one thing on any school budget, is you try to look at your full-time equivalents and make sure that you kind of control them to the extent that you can. And if you're looking at increases in salaries, you know, that's going to be compounded a little if you start increasing numbers. So in this case, we had no alternative but to add that teacher assistant. We're in the middle of negotiations with certified teachers, so there's a placeholder in the budget to cover any contractual increases in salaries. The non-certified bargaining contract doesn't expire until 6/30/24, and we have the increase of 1.75% for FY23. Administrative salaries are based on the current contracts in place. The sub-teacher costs, which we increased a couple of years back, is going up to a daily rate of $135. That's a number that, again, we're hoping that as we move out of this pandemic, that we're not going to need as many subs to cover things like quarantining and that. So we're hoping that we can see some relief in that number, but at this point in time, I am budgeting consistent with where we were in FY21 and FY22. And the teacher coverage pay, we've got that in there, and that's a result of an MOA that we have with the teachers to cover classes. So we've got that budgeted in the salaries and wages. On the fringe benefit side, our healthcare rate increase is going to be 6%, and dental care rate increase is about 3%. We've mitigated those increases a little bit with some changes in some people are taking the buyout option. Others have gone from family to single. So we're seeing a little bit of a benefit in that regard. But we are looking at And these are the same increases that the town is using for their health and dental increases. Co-shares for the teachers at 20, non-certified administrative at 18. There's been an increase in the teacher pension contribution of 0.16. It's going up from like 14.88 to 15.04, I believe, in 23. So we're seeing a little bit of an uptick in the pension contribution for teachers. And as a result of increases in payroll, your payroll taxes and your defined contribution pension expense will increase as salaries increase. But there's nothing really unusual in the fringe benefit line. On the next slide, this is going to be the Portsmouth High School. If we'll look at the budget book that I submitted, let me get you the page number on that one. It might be easier to look at it there. Okay, so that's on page 24, excuse me, 22. I didn't realize you had that up there, Jen. So you can see that we're looking at basically taking and using a tuition number of, you can see in 2023 is 13.5, which is for the contract. And in 2022, we're at 10,471. That 10,471 is based on a minimum number of students at 95. So that one is going to be somewhat mitigated. But if you look at the projections for the high school, and we wind up taking out grade 12 at 19, I believe we're going to be adding in grade 7, which is much higher. It's going to bring us upwards into the lower 90s. We're going to see a little bit more of an impact going into FY24. And we knew that this was going to be an increase, obviously, that we'd have to bear. We don't know exactly what the number will be until we complete the the RFP process. But I would venture to say that we're probably not going to see anything less than the 13.5, certainly at this point.
John, if I could, just to clarify that we have a minimum of 100 students that we're paying for, not the 95 per this contract.
Excuse me, 100, but we have 95. Yeah, we have 13. We have 100 students that we're paying for. Right.
And
so there's 13 extra students. Initially, what we were looking at was 95 students in the projection. I'm not sure how the pandemic has impacted that in terms of whether it's homeschooling or kids that have gone into private and parochial. So, but we do anticipate that coming back based on some of the changes in the increased enrollment we have at the elementary school, at the middle school, excuse me.
On that previous slide that you put in for, it's in your notes, you put in that one additional teacher's assistant was going to be at a number of about, it's 78, I believe, 78 even. Are you including salary plus benefits on that?
Yes. Yep. And that's probably going to be family health care at this point. we could do better than that, but at this point, we're looking at adding family health care.
Because I look at your breakdown of your teacher's assistants, and that's a lot of benefits compared to what your teacher's assistants are being paid now per this contract at the 22-23 rate.
Yeah, so that's traditionally with most school districts, those TAs get almost the same amount, if not more, in benefits than they do in salaries. And I know that's the last 2 districts I've worked in. That's the way it's been. They're often doing that for the benefits, for the most part, obviously for the the reduced hours as well too. So, but those those are the the traditional benefits that you would see.
And this hasn't been discussed yet, but I guess I see these numbers keep going up, but then the tuition rate for I don't even know if you want to call them tuition students stays at that $6,000 number, but that number never increases, but our expenditures keep increasing. So that's one of my concerns with that. My other concern is that we have a brochure in the front office that says that rate is prorated for kids that come in. So here we are banking on $6,000, but we're advertising that number is being prorated. So we can be sitting there and saying, oh, well, we have 8 kids, but 2 of them are prorated. So we're not really using that. We're not really getting that full $6,000 number.
Yeah, I think they prorate that on a quarterly basis, but if you could have move-ins, and we've had this in the past where you have 2 that come in the middle of the years that would equate for a full year's worth of tuition. So I don't know how the pandemic has impacted that. We had voted last year to spend about $15,000 in advertising and promotional and PR. It might be a very difficult year to kind of measure the results of that, but I think it's clearly a number that's relatively low when you look at it, especially when you look at what we're paying to send children out of district. On our end, it's costing us, well, we know it's costing us $13,500 to send high schoolers out, but we also have students that are going to the CTE programs, whether it's at the Met or Newport Collaborative, and those are in the 15. The Newport is like 15,500, I believe. The Met is
19.
Is 19. Yeah, and Tiverton is up at 19 based on, and that's the maximum that they can charge Little Compton based on their per pupil amount.
So I know the out of district tuition, we had tried another tuition rate. I can't remember what it was off the top of my head, but it was much higher than $6,000. And we didn't get anyone that was interested. And those seats were still empty in the classrooms, and those teachers were still teaching, and the heat was still on, and our expenditures were still the same. So as a whole, the committee decided to lower it some, and we now have some out of district tuition, and they are not costing us more heat. They're not costing us any more employees. They're not costing us anything new. So they're just helping us with our revenue. So I am thankful that the past chair spearheaded this idea, and that we do have a little extra money and some extra kids from somewhere other than Little Compton. We can make some new friends. and we have them in our school system.
I just think that maybe that should have gone up a little bit. You know, whether it was increased by 1%, 2%, or 3%, I don't think is going to persuade somebody one way or another. I know the previous tuition that you're referring to was at $10,000 prior.
I think it started at 14. I think then we tried 10 and then we settled at 6, I think is how it went.
I just kind of look at it this probably is that if you look at the numbers that we're proposing right now, this is going to be almost $1 million increase within a 4-year period from 2019 at that 7,259 to 2023 at 8,178 at $1 million increase. And we were just going to keep things steady like that. To me, that doesn't make good business sense.
All right, Mr. McNamee.
Okay, so let's get back to the, so on the special education, we're looking at an estimate for the out-of-district tuition there of approximately $114,000. Again, that can fluctuate depending on the needs of the students, and so it's one that I'm hoping we can be a little bit lower than that, but I think it's a reasonable budget to use at this point in time. And as we discussed with the, right now, we're looking at 4 students in the voc ed programs, 1 at the Met, 2 at Newport Career and Technical, and 1 over at Tiverton. I'm not sure if the Tiverton student is going to be a senior next year, so we're assuming that they would graduate out in 24. But you know, the career in tech has been adding a little bit more to our out-of-district tuition. Now, if you think that these students, if they go to Portsmouth and they don't take a career tech path, it's going to be a lower number. But obviously, these are decisions that parents and students are making to pursue the voc ed side of it. So there is going to be a little bit of an added cost for our district tuition for that. This was very positive this year. So we met with the Newport County Regional Board a couple of weeks ago, all the business managers and superintendents, and we're looking at a reduction in our costs of $49,000. So they're budgeting, they're budgeting $315,000 as their overall cost for Little Compton. We get 2 federal funding grants, IDEA Part B, that we can take a portion of it and allocate it to this tuition, as well as some of the IDEA preschool that we get. So we're able to offset that number. So what we're showing as the net expense on the general fund is $219,000, which is $49,000 lower than FY22. So that was pretty good news on that end. Our busing costs will be moving into our 3rd year on the contract. We're looking at standard 3% increase. We still have 6 buses plus a midday pre-K run. Although that one wouldn't be running if we didn't have a pre-K. We have 1 late bus, and we have some additional costs for fuel charges, and we also supply some buses for the extracurricular and athletic programs. And then the bus monitors, by state law, K through 5 have to have monitors on the buses. So we are providing the cost of those monitors through the busing contract. So those numbers will show some modest increases over FY22 to reflect the contractual obligations for the transportation. Utility costs, the fuel oil, we're paying $2.42 a gallon. We went out for bid with Tiverton and locked into that rate. We use about 15,000 gallons of fuel oil a year, but who knows where that number is going to wind up going. The electricity at 90,000, I'm thinking that I could probably get that. We could propose a savings of anywhere of 15 to 20,000, and we're working now with the town. And I've mentioned this at the previous budget workshops, the virtual net metering. Well, we're moving ahead with that. There's going to be an RFP going out for a financial advisor, which is a requirement to get into a virtual net metering program. That financial advisor's cost, which is going to be something less than 20,000, will be ultimately picked up by the vendors that's going to be supplying the energy through whatever projects they're going to bid on to supply the energy costs. And we're estimating, because I do a virtual net metering in Lincoln, and we're saving about 30% on our electric bill by doing that. The timing of that is that the RFP for the financial advisor should be going out within the next 30 days. They'll probably put out a RFP on the street for a project sometime in April. That'll probably stay out about 90 days, at which point all the responses to the RFP get evaluated by the financial advisor and the selection committee for the town and the school. And then hopefully we'll enter into a contract. I'm targeting sometime by the end of September, at the latest by 12/31. So we should see at least a half a year's worth of savings on the use of the virtual net metering.
I got to, before you go on that one.
Yep.
When we upgraded the lights in our school,
Yep.
that was sold on to us that the money that we spent on the lights would reflect in our savings of electricity.
Yep.
So I don't see a savings in here in your proposed graph. I see an increase. So can you explain that? Because that's.
So we have, we do have, the kilowatt hours have been reduced slightly, but we also have a little bit higher demand in terms of a lot of the air exchange systems that we have in there. We have a lot more computer equipment running. So we have a lot more devices that are calling for electricity than we had in the past. So, and we're also paying for those, and that's being charged to the electric bill. So that's, I believe, about $1,500 a month. So realistically, we would be seeing a little bit of a savings on that if you pull that cost out. But we're also seeing a little bit of an increase in demand, which is, something that we've got to continue to look at. As part of this virtual net metering, we're also going to be doing some research on whether we can look at some solar options as well to kind of reduce the the electric usage as well too. And that'll be all part of the overall RFP when it goes out.
Rita, I saw your hand up. Do you have a question or a comment?
I did, and you just really answered my question now, John, and thank you so much. We hadn't talked about virtual net metering in a while, so I had to remember what it was, and if it did include some concept of solar. So I'm glad that we're going to be doing that. Thank you so much for sticking with this project, and I'm sure it's going to come through. Thank you.
Oh, it's definitely going to come through. We've got we've actually had a meeting with the State Department of Energy, Tony Texera and myself, to kind of move this forward, and they've actually provided us with drafts of the RFPs. So the first one is going to be going out shortly. The town is going to issue that one, and then once that one's out, the second one will go out for the existing projects to provide the green energy to the virtual net metering project. So
Awesome. That's just that's delightful. Thank you. And make sure they consider putting some electrical vehicle charging stations in town somewhere, like maybe at the school.
Well, interesting you should bring that up, because they're looking to do the parking lot, the town is. And I know that the National Grid can provide those stations at no charge to the district. So I've been talking to Tony about that, and seeing if we can get a couple of those included when we do over the parking lot.
Thank you, John.
Welcome. Curriculum supplies, these have been fairly consistent. Where in the superintendent can speak to this, there is some increases in mandatory curriculum changes that RIDE has been putting into place. Some of these Lori's been able to get into ESSER 3 and ESSER 2 funding, but we do have some costs that are going to be included in our overall textbooks and supply line item. So we're looking at a little bit of an increase in that of $11,575.
Yeah, I'll speak a little bit about that. I have been able to fold in over $50,000 into ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. The EL education resources, our new ELA curriculum package. And also we've upgraded our math curriculum. We're using, I can hear my husband in the background. Sorry, everybody. Hold on. Sorry about that. But a lot of these packages, and they're being well received. Our kids love the anchor text in ELA this year, especially. But a lot of these packages also have curriculum materials that are not part that have to be replenished every year. And so that's where that increased cost is. But we are on course to meet the state requirement for having culturally sensitive materials of the highest quality available. We had to choose from several vetted lists that RIDE provided us. And our teams researched vendors, and they've made an excellent selection of new materials in math and ELA. And now we're working on science that has a 2024 deadline, and we're on course. We have a consultant for that, and I've rolled some of that expense into Title II. So we are maximizing our federal resources like never before. Even at that, we still need some on the operations side.
Great, thank you. Hannah, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about textbooks. Now that all of our students have Chromebooks and this amazing access to technology, is this price going up because of technology costs, getting subscriptions to online textbooks? Or is this because, I mean, I'm thinking of like the math journals and stuff, like you said, that have to get purchased every year. Just because that's a very large increase. So I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of those are going to be consumables, but what we've done is it's really more of a curriculum expense than it really a textbook. Most of the textbooks will be certainly electronic, and there are various programs that the district is using. But we include that cost, some of that cost in that textbook line item. There's also some monies in there to give our new principals some flexibility if there are going to be changes in the curriculum that he'd like to propose. Certainly coming in kind of halfway through the year, I wanted to provide some flexibility in the budgeting process to give him some latitude to potentially institute some new programs.
Okay.
So there's some of that in there as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking because it made me think of
Right.
like when I buy my college textbooks, they always try to get you like you get the print and the digital stuff, but you can't break up the bundle and it ends up never actually being a benefit. So I was wondering if there was something like that going on or what have you, but thank you for that explanation.
If I may, Hannah, you'll see when you look at my goals, I've listed many of those online resources that we didn't have before. Kidem is one of them, and it is related to our new ELA package. Also math, we have HMH online. And so, yes, we have more online resources, high quality, than ever before, and you do get what you pay for. So there is a shift away from hard copy to online resources now that our students have the best Chromebooks on the market for educational use. And these things aren't cheap. So the proof is in the pudding. Our kids are learning and moving forward beautifully, in spite of all the challenges.
All right. John, do you want to go to your technology budget at this point? Because there's a lot of, some of yours are capital outlays, but you've got some other expenditures too. But do you want to kind of briefly go through yours?
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. So Chromebook replacements, we are going to start. We had a couple of grades on still new but slightly older model Chromebooks. So we're going to start our refresh cycle with a couple of those grades where those key grades will be the ones receiving devices, and they'll actually hold on to their devices for several years before receiving their next one or matriculating out of the school. So Chromebook replacements take care of kickstarting that program, as well as replacing any damages that we identify when inspecting them all at the end of the year, as well as a refresh of a few staff devices and a couple new staff devices for some of those people that don't currently have one or aren't here yet. And we also have a little bit for classroom upgrades. Most of these are wiring updates for old, outdated stuff that needs to be made current, broken fixtures, wall plates, that sort of thing. We're doing some upgrades on some of the phones, the oldest ones in the fleets, as well as some of the hotspots. We still issue hotspots to a couple families, more than a couple families that don't have connectivity options at their homes. And with some of the new standards coming out, it's time to update a couple of those, as well as we are running low on them, so we need a couple more. There's a Windows device refresh for that will cover licensing for a couple products that need to be updated to work on modern versions of Windows, as well as a couple laptops and devices for office staff that have older ones. and some common area AV equipment, smaller line items there. Oh, and that's it really. We don't have as much this year.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the capital reserve transfer. So as I mentioned earlier on, what we're anticipating doing is that in order for us to maximize our housing aid reimbursement from Department of Ed, which would allow us to get bonus incentives, probably about 15%. We get a standard 35% reimbursement, which every district gets. And then there are bonus incentives, which can add up to about 15. So I would be looking at trying to get a 50% reimbursement from RIDE for any capital expenditures that we make under the 5-year program. There's a minimum that we need to spend, and that's $500,000. So in order for us to be able to spend that money, we actually have to have some of it. So what I'm looking to do is to try to get at a minimum $300,000 set aside that we can then use that money to do a $500,000 program. The balance obviously would be coming back from RIDE. In the meantime, we could use funds that we have sitting over at the Newport Collaborative that we've already recognized the revenue for. So there's some cash available there, so we don't disrupt any of the cash flow at the town side. So that what we would really be looking at is getting a capital fund or a capital reserve fund with about a goal of $300,000 in it. If we take the 42.5 and we agree that we can transfer that out of this year's budget, and everybody has to understand that's coming out of that 295 that we're requesting from the town. But if you recall last year, we asked the town to provide us with some capital in the past. So I don't think it's any different than what we're trying to do here. We'll make that point, obviously, to the Budget Commission that we need to kind of put some money in there for capital. And if you look at the 5-year plan, there's a lot of deferred maintenance that's in there that unless we start to address these problems and start to put some money aside, we're going to be behind the 8 ball again in another 4 or 5 years. So if we take the 42.5, and right now we have about $269,000 in accumulated surplus, which is our audited accumulated surplus. The audits just came out the other day. If we vote to transfer 100,000, that gives us 142.5 in that account. We have about $43,000 sitting over at the collaborative. That's fund balance related. That's money that's ours that we would have to bring into revenue somehow. But what I'm proposing to do is transfer that money and maybe any additional monies that would be coming out of the collaborative into this capital reserve. So at a minimum, we're looking at 43,000. That would bring us up to about 185.5 to start the year off. Now, in the event that we have a surplus in FY23, I would probably come back to the committee and request that we take any type of a surplus that we might be able to generate in 22 as well and in 23 and put it into that capital reserve to kind of get to that $300,000 goal so we can start to hit some of these projects. And it's very difficult. And, the town doesn't, in their own right, they're looking to fund some capital with some debt. I don't know if they're going to be doing a bond or they're going to be doing some borrowing from banks, but they're looking to obviously invest in, and they need to invest in some of their capital in some of their buildings as well. So I think this is a prudent method to kind of set aside some funds that will allow us to address some of the deferred maintenance issues that we're going to be seeing. So we could always take that 42.5 out and reduce the ask from the town below the 4%. But I'm thinking that this is probably not a bad year, because I'm assuming that there's going to be some funds available at the town level that you know, it would be a good year to start to put this aside, and I would anticipate that we would do, you know, at a minimum 50,000 a year going forward, and maybe hoping to get some surplus that if we can generate it into the capital as well.
John, the money that you say that we have left over, that 43,000 that's sitting in special ed.
Yep.
Can't that be put straight towards our bill now of that 219,000? I think it was net on that week where you're coming down on.
Yeah, one of the things we've got to be careful of, and I haven't really figured this out yet, is that you have a maintenance of effort on your special education. So if you reduce that number significantly, you're not going to get, they're going to reduce the $94,000 that we get in IDA grants. So there's a formula that they use that they require you to have a certain maintenance of effort requirement for special education. So I'm treading lightly on how we bring that in. But you're right, we could use that to reduce the 219, but the reality is that doesn't give us anything to work with to do any of the deferred maintenance. And you know, it's not as if the town is going to be in a position that they're going to want to provide. I've been asking for funds, and I give them a hard time. They're going to be refinancing the school debt, I think, reducing that number. And I was hoping that maybe we could get a little bit of that number, the debt reduction, which is already in the tax base, to come over to school to help us with the capital. I haven't exhausted that request yet, but I make it known to them every time I see them that I'd really like to have some of those funds. And one of the good things is that they are incorporating me into a lot of the meetings they're having with the debt and with the financial advisors on this whole restructuring. So I have a little bit of knowledge on what's happening, which I think is good.
I guess my one point of view on this, and I could be wrong, but so basically Newport County Regional is basically sitting on $42,000 and $43,000 of our money right now.
Well, there's actually another 182,000, but with that money's already been recorded as revenue, but the cash is sitting there. So we can bring that cash in. We're not in a position where we need the cash at this point. But I'd be using that, basically that cash, to help fund the capital reserve until the housing aid comes in. Because the housing aid is going to come in over maybe a year or two. So this would wind up giving us the funds in order to do the projects. That 182 doesn't impact our operations or our accumulated fund balance. The 43 does, and there's some potential that there could be some additional monies. I think they're saying there could be as much as 20,000 of additional for FY22. So we do have that sitting over there, and that you'd look at that as saying, well, okay, you can use that to help offset any big increases you might have in out-of-district tuition for special education. But we've got an accumulated surplus now of about 269. Even if we take 100 out, we've got 169,000 that's in there. So I think I've got enough of a cushion there. You know, the town never wants you to have too much fund balance because they think you're, I don't know what they think you're doing with it, but from our standpoint, we really need to kind of build up some reserve in order for us to do these deferred maintenance projects. And I think this to me is the least painful, and it's done in little chunks, so it's not, you know, we're not saying, okay, all of a sudden we need $2 million to do a project. I mean, if we can kind of bite off some of these a little at a time, and with the housing aid program, I mean, it's kind of a revolving program. So you every time you spend some money, you're going to get, you know, right now, if you commit, you'll get 50% back. I'm assuming that they'll probably increase or keep the incentives in place. Some of them do sunset at the end of 23 and at the end of 24, but I think we really need to kind of look at that 5-year plan and get something in place that allow us to fund that. So yeah, I don't, like, you can always take it in, you could always reduce the ask from the town, but I just think long term that doesn't do anything for our capital needs.
If I may, I agree. You know, so there are two ways to move forward. We use our own reserves as sort of a line of credit so that we can leverage the 50% reimbursement, or we take this, we throw it against some of it against FY 2023, and then have to ask the town for money for capital improvements, deferred maintenance, capital improvements, let alone any sort of educational enhancements that we may want. So we feel this is a creative way to leverage our reserves, and also the nice deep reimbursement levels that we could enjoy if we strike while while they're still in play.
Thanks, Mr. McNamee. Thanks for that explanation.
Welcome.
Capital reserves. Oh, are we at the end already? No way.
Well,
The last
6:18. So I don't know if anybody has any, you know, any questions, and you know, we do have obviously another meeting on the 16th. So again, at that point, we would need to finalize that budget for approval by the committee on the 28th. Unless we're in a position where we think we can do it after next week's meeting, we could try to schedule something after next week's meeting to approve it, but that's up to the committee.
I just have one thing to interject, and that is I didn't catch it this weekend, John, and I didn't catch it today when I was looking at the slides, and I take full responsibility. We have 3 bus routes in the morning, 1 at midday and 4 in the afternoon at Wilbur McMahon. So we have 8. And then for Portsmouth High School, we have 5. We have a door-to-door in the morning pickup, an express bus that leaves from Wilbur McMahon. We have a 2 o'clock dismissal. We have a 3 o'clock express and a 5 o'clock express for students engaged in library research work after school, or sports, music, drama, club activities, service work, etc. So
Right.
we have a lot of buses.
But it's still only 6 buses.
Yeah, I know. Yes. But I just wanted to explain that because I did get some texts.
So I guess I got a question as far as the reimbursement for like pre-K. How do we get reimbursed for that? Is that through the Newport County Regional, or what offsets the cost of that?
Yeah, so those costs are allocated among all the districts in the Newport County Regional. And we'll get our percentage share of that, of those costs, or the net costs, I should say, in that.
So
that's built into the budget.
So what's the money that we bring in from that to offset our costs? Because it's not only, and I understand that the buses get charged out per day, but so we have the midday bus, plus we have the salary of the teacher and all the benefits that go with that. In our attendance rolls or enrollment rolls, we show 3 students for that.
Well, see, our buses are, they're required under federal law, and it's students at 3 or over, we're required to transport them to pre-K. If they're special needs students. So that's a requirement within the district. That's not a Newport County requirement.
Also, the IDEA money offsets the cost, Mike. That much of the teacher's salary is absorbed. This is an integrated preschool. We usually have 15 or more students engaged in it. You'll see our numbers, our enrollment drop sort of syncs up with that. And we have peers as well as students with vulnerabilities, and it is a best practice. It's a research-based delivery model, and our parents love it. They come in from all over Newport County. It is a gem in the best of times. During the pandemic, it's been difficult to have 3-year-olds with distancing and masks and so forth. And so some of the families opted out this year and last year, but we're looking to come to full capacity, a full complement of kiddos in the morning and in the afternoon, our pre-K, preschool and our pre-K. So fingers crossed. But IDEA money really does offset much of it, if not most of it.
So to Mike's point is that all the programs are meshed together, and then we get an allocable share of the net cost to the district. So everybody shares in that, whether if the pre-K is being held in Little Compton, it could be held in Tiverton, it would all be combined. And then we get a share of the net cost, and that's what we wind up paying to the collaborative. So we don't get any specific direct benefit from the pre-K, because that's a program sponsored by Newport County, but the expenses are included in that overall cost and spread out among all the districts.
I guess I'm sorry. I guess I'm not following on that. I mean, I understand the philosophy of the program, and I have no issues with the program. I get it. I understand that. I guess I just, because, and I could be wrong on this, and Lori, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have kids coming from other districts for that program. And I'm just wondering, when I see a teacher's salary in our budget, are we getting reimbursed from the kids from the other districts through that program to offset the cost of our teacher that we're paying?
We also have children going to specialized programs in other districts that the region administers as well. So we're part of the collaborative, consortium collaborative, cooperative. And so we all benefit, every district benefits from the programs that are offered in Tiverton, in Middletown. So that's how that works. It's hard to sort of wrap your mind around fiscally, but it is collaboratively funded, collaboratively supported, and kids are moving in and out all the time. Like I said, we have kids in Tiverton and we have kids in Middletown.
Right, that's the 114,000, right? For the
Right, but,
tuition, right?
right. So, but on the collaborative, what happens is all the expenses get included, what we're paying, what Tiverton is paying, and they gross those up. And then they deduct all the expenses that we're paying directly for special education. And we come down to a net number that gets allocated so that our allocations can range from 6 to 8% of the total of the overall costs. So when they allocate those overall costs, grossed up, back out what we're expending, it's the net amount that we wind up paying to support the collaborative. So in essence, we're getting the benefit as everybody else is getting the benefit, but certainly at a much lower level because we're not as big as some of the other districts. But it's kind of a convoluted formula, but it seems to work at this point. Didn't work when Portsmouth was in there, but it works now.
Thank you. Are there any other committee members with questions?
I just want to make a comment if I can, Polly. Looks like a tremendous amount of effort put into this first draft and it's comprehensive and thoughtful. Doesn't look like a bunch of wiggle room. But I am a little concerned because we're asking for the maximum and we haven't done that in a while. And I think there will be some eyebrows raised in the town. And so I think we have to just be absolutely certain that we've scrubbed. And again, this is first draft, so it looks very reasonable to me, but that's my only sort of concern.
Thanks, Rita. Travis?
Yeah, to echo both Rita's excellent job on putting it together, but to also share Rita's concern and then also Mike's concern. We've seen enrollment drop 22% from the start of, 2019, where we were at 369 to now we're just under 300 at 288. And we're asking for these increases. And while we could make arguments across the board, I just think we should really be diligent in how we present this to the town. You've done an excellent job in presenting it to us tonight, but as Rita shared, asking for this amount, and as Mike also highlighted, we're going to really have to show a means for justifying it. So great start. It's going to be a challenge, but I think we got the right people in the places. So thank you, John, Lori, Jonathan.
Thanks, Travis. Hannah?
Thank you all for the incredibly hard work in putting together this first draft. On the topic of enrollment, I just wanted to ask if there was some sort of projection anybody has. I was at the Portsmouth School Committee meeting last night and their assistant superintendent presented like a 10-year projection that they had of all grade levels in enrollment. And I jotted down the high school numbers as it pertains to us, but I was wondering if there was something like that we had generated or the state generates for us that maybe it would just be nice for all of us to have, or even to publicize to the community if it's good projection, but
you're an optimist.
Have that.
You're an optimist, and I love that, Hannah. There is one, and it is in the stage 2. It was done by Studio Jade.
Okay.
The last one was in 2010, and that was done by NASDAQ, and that definitely, I'll try to dig that out. So that accurately predicted exactly what Little Compton is seeing. It could be attributed to rural gentrification, obviously inflated, real estate prices that are through the roof. I think there are many different factors that entering into, we could talk about, housing that's affordable housing. I know the Housing Trust is working on that. We've seen a lot of families who were renters have to leave because owners then sold, especially in this market. So, yeah, I mean, if every now and then I ask Heather, you know, why did this well, they were renting. And so it's just out of reach for emerging families in many, it's we certainly don't want it to become a gated community. But I think some of that is beyond this body's control.
Definitely.
Thank you. Any more questions from the committee?
All right, yeah, I gotta ask John a question.
Go ahead, Mike.
John, on your medical premiums for retirees, it says year-end projection, it comes in at 20,000, but then your budget for 2023 is at $2,650. Is that a misprint?
No, I think we're just paying for Chris Osborne for the is it 1 year, Lori? In that contract? Yeah.
So that's why there's a big
That was
increase.
part of the early retirement package. Mike.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions from any of the audience?
I don't see anything right now, but if they do, they could use the raise hand feature.
If anyone has any questions, use the raise hand feature, please. Okay, if there's no more questions, I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Hannah,
Second,
thank you, Rita. All in favor, we have roll call, please.
Holly Ellen,
Aye.
Travis Audi,
Aye.
Hannah App,
Aye.
Rita Kenahan,
aye.
Mike Rocha.
Aye.
Terrific. Thank you, everyone. We'll be switching over to our regular school committee meeting.